Like many boys, the young me hated school. When you lack an emotional vocabulary, it's hard to escape predatory bullies, apathetic teachers, and a cocktail of drugs promising domesticated children in the same way that Budweiser promises social grace. Staying home from school was my goal every single morning. Faking sickness, throwing tantrums, breaking things, insulting my elders, and every other petulant act imaginable was fair game. I felt that if no one was going to care about me, I was going to not care right back. Now, school spirit wasn't exactly standard fare when your only form of stress relief was peas and pizza molded from the same scuzzy paste and slapped onto a sweaty styrofoam tray. Me acting as a prepubescent mediator in my parents' emotionally crippling divorce while going to school, it gave me a habit of handling stress in the same way one might handle a 12-legged parasite in their pants. There's a lot of screaming, a lot of sudden movements, and a crowd of onlookers who aren't as sure what to do with their hands as they are what to do with their eyes. I had a loving family, dysfunctional as it was. After the custody battle, my single mother wanted the best for her little ginger snap, and my then alcoholic father did whatever he could to stay within reach. But since my mother was one to justify her actions with good intentions alone, she responded to my bad behavior with parenting that only sounded right. Mom dragged me into the offices of superficial psychiatrists who then diagnosed me with Asperger's syndrome and then funneled Ambien, Abilify, Depakote, Prozac, Seroquel, Xanax, Risperdal, Geodin, Prevacid, just a whole bunch of colorful tablets into a mouth that much preferred M&Ms. I had rage episodes, an uncontrollable appetite, violent outbursts, hallucinations, and other reactions I cannot share here without becoming the kind of internet celebrity that could never quite make it past a job interview. I looked at clouds and I saw shapes that I thought were omens for my future superpowers. My dad actually suggested to my mom that she should simply let me jump out a window to confirm that no, I can't fly. And during a game of Super Smash Bros. One day, I saw an angry old man's face growing out of my bedroom wall. I'm stumbling down halls with neurons just firing blindly in a Prozac-laced fog in dire hopes of forming a coherent thought. People were often too agitated to pay attention to my feelings unless I went into a meltdown so dramatic that only a reflective catharsis could follow. In the meantime, I did things like sprain a kid's ankle in 3rd grade because I didn't like what he said to me. A homeroom teacher even called the police on me when my 8th grade self threatened to jump off a railing just to avoid class. Another one of my high points was when I caused a detention room evacuation after I crawled under a desk and called the proctor names foul enough to justify his finding creative uses for a meter stick. When I was at my worst, I would draw pictures of my teachers dying, along with insulting notes, and these depictions were just nasty, like they involved buzzsaws, decapitation by death sickle in one instance, and I would give the note and the drawing to my subjects, the people I drew. The point was I never quite knew how to recover when I was facing distress of some kind. I could give you an itemized list of interactions people directed towards me, but for the sake of brevity, I will leave that to your imagination. I never lashed out unprovoked, but over time it took less for me to feel provoked. I knew that others wanted me to behave a certain way, but I could never quite measure up to the moving goalposts, and I was quickly resenting the chase. I didn't know who I was to begin with, but I knew that my feelings didn't seem to matter since many of my relationships were already combative. I became openly petulant and spoiled in my thinking because honestly, good manners and all of those things just seemed to not matter anymore. And imagine how Mom felt. She weakened as I became more violent and withdrawn. I abused her and others because shutting out the world was the only thing that didn't hurt. Life was basically a 16-year-long Behind the Music episode, except the starring train wreck was expected to take drugs. It would just be cry, lash out, learn nothing, take a pill, cry, lash out, take a pill under supervision, hallucinate, ignore the voices, and then go to sleep and do it all over again. I know it looks like I've done a lot of work to make my problems as a child seem unique, but I think that what I dealt with is actually typical of many boys. I think many of these problems go unaddressed because few boys, if any, ever really learn to articulate the nature of their problems, and the people most frustrated by their behavior have already since decided not to discuss the issues any further. I felt that the adults around me often made excuses not to engage on a level that I needed at the time, because they weren't keen on investing the energy to find that level. I've dealt with many exasperated teachers who would end conversations with me by saying, I don't know, Sage, life just sucks. And whenever I heard that, that only really inspired me to make them live life more than I did, whereas I would consider killing myself as an alluring alternative. When you are a little boy, you experience a paradox where you want to fit in with people who already act like that they understand you. And when you do not meet their expectations, it's not their fault for expecting you to be a certain way, it's your fault for not meeting their expectations. And your friendships with other boys could be just as confused because they don't know about closing the implied communication gaps any better than you do. This means that your entire social and emotional health depends on finding people who actually empathize with who you are. This doesn't mean they have to tell you what you want to hear when you're a kid and you want everything to go your way. It's about feeling like you've been heard, even if they tell you the reality of the situation and you have to live with it. Without feeling connected to someone, your desire to reconcile and grow actually turns into a plan to retaliate. Retaliate even if it means validating horrible things people have said about you. A boy's health can erode until he resorts to gunfire or suicide just to make people look inside of his head for once. No one who feels loved would consider violence. I think that every boy lashing out at himself or others represents a failure to help a troubled human being recover from unprocessed distress. I also imagine that many people do not feel comfortable reflecting on a boy's suicide because it would mean admitting that death was more comforting than they ever were. And I can count on one hand the teachers who tried to reach me despite any temptation to ask for a raise first. And I improved once I felt understood, and after pretending to take my medication for a few days. Georgian schools kept passing me along as someone else's problem. Arlington, Bedford, Evelyn C. West, Trickham Middle, Richard Middle, Shiloh High, and all sorts of other schools flashed across my increasingly suspicious record until I was finally discarded into Hooper Renwick, which is a high school for the emotionally disturbed. Students would throw chairs, call black teachers niggers, stab staff, and break out into fights in full view of our combat-trained principal. It was insane. We had padded rooms ready for feral hooperheads, but it was here that I found my first sweetheart. Sadly, I wasn't allowed to hold her hand because physical contact was a no-no there. There were many rules there that were preventing total anarchy in the same way that a plain rubber band would keep a garden hose from unraveling. We were at the last place we could go before going off to military school or juvenile detention facilities or even get tried as an adult, go to prison. It was not, this was your last chance. Hooper Renwick was the place where you decided it's here or much worse. Now, one of the many heroic teachers there played a vital role in my recovery. Like other teachers, he didn't tell me what I wanted to hear, and he disciplined me by the books, but he cared, so I cared right back. Unfortunately, I carried too much baggage to make it through personal security checks and take flight from the gate, so I burned out in my senior year and directed my remaining energy toward crawling out the door with robotic conviction. It was as if every muscle, nerve ending, neurotransmitter, and quantized unit of will in my body all campaigned around the slogan, "Let me out, let me out, let me out." My mother gave up and put me on the next flight out of state. I was 16 at the time. My father took custody and threw all of my pills away. Now, going cold turkey made my mom, despite being 2 states away, expect a psycho holocaust that would make Elliot Rodger look like he just needed a nap. But things went better than expected. I did fight Dad, but dear God did he fight back. One suicide attempt and police visit later, I slowly adapted to paying my way with physical labor in my dad's construction business. Seeing life from above a blue collar has a way of reminding you that you can't go anywhere when people need you. I had a few experiences with backfiring cement mixer hoses, inhaling ammonia fume sans respirator on a deadline in a house sealed shut from fire damage, and scrubbing blacktops as a ginger in June. Some of my father's more interesting clients included an Air Force pilot whose wife caused a toilet explosion in a jerry-rigged meth lab, and an excessively wealthy stay-at-home mom who invests in men like she would in stock, where alimony payments were dividends. In the case of the wealthy stay-at-home mom, she had a new neurosurgeon boyfriend who bought her son a new truck and TV. So I developed aspirations for the first time, but being at the bottom of the ladder in U.S. education as a high school dropout doesn't exactly secure stipends from MIT. So I enrolled in a Mississippi community college with a GED and crumbs of humble pie just clinging to my lips. I messed up big time, and I had to own up to that and turn things around. But I knew that this time things were going to be different. My credentials grew rapidly enough to show that I was living a new life. My studies made the news and brought me to meet state politicians in person, namely after my participation in a NASA-hosted national competition. I had supportive advisors who were some of the most wonderful people I've ever had the fortune of meeting. And I came back to Georgia State University, where I got a 4.18 institutional GPA out of 4.0, and I finally landed in Kennesaw State University just for a shorter commute. I graduated summa cum laude with a Bachelor's of Science as of December 15th, 2015, last Tuesday. And I was the only student in my college to graduate with an added honor scholar designation on top of the Latin. And I was the only student in the university's history to start a non-Greek student organization that evolved into a national body, that is Zen Men. So my experience in school and my father's post-divorce life motivated my foray into men's rights activism. Kennesaw State faculty responded to my concern for the state of young men and little boys by falsely accusing me of creating a hostile work environment, of fantasizing about murdering women, and of advocating rape. Now, those are the bad ones. There were good ones who were very supportive of me, and they did their jobs. They were neutral, and they were just awesome. I love them very much. Thank you, thank you, thank you. But, of course, there were some crazy people with torches and pitchforks. And at this point, I was an entirely different person, so I was understandably upset about facing the same hostility and stubbornness that influenced my upbringing and my father's emotional health after the divorce. A young man or a little boy should not have to go through what I went through. His brain shouldn't be mixed with pills when the recipe called for empathy. He should not be told that his hugs, kisses, and sweet words are tools of sexual abuse, or that it will cause problems for the school if you share affection. A boy should be treated as if he has feelings and dreams, and he deserves love and nurture, and should only face discipline by people who understand that discipline and being tough on a boy is only really going to work if you know that the boy has the ability to grow. My father took no bullshit, but he gave me a sense of accountability and empathy which served as the pillars for turning my life around. If you are the proud parent of a little boy, please look at him and remember that he needs you and he needs love. His schools may treat him poorly, so if he lashes out, strive to understand why. Don't assume that he is a problem or that you automatically know what's best because you're mom or dad. You need to assume that he is a human being who has a problem, and at first you have no idea what you're talking about. Let him describe his hurt when he's calm and lucid. If you confront him during an upset, he may say something that he either doesn't understand or doesn't mean. If he seems simplistic, petulant, or withdrawn, I've been all of those things, set healthy boundaries and later follow up with smaller questions until he feels understood and can sense what he can control and cannot control. Only then can you help him make an informed decision about what to do to solve a problem. Everything else is guesswork. And if you demonstrate any lack of faith in him, then he may devolve trying to understand how to meet an indefinable standard. When he feels free to explore, under reasonable boundaries and with fulfilling activities, he will naturally come to value his education. I speak as someone who treasures the innocence and excitement that he didn't get to experience. I wanted to laugh, hold hands, cry, build things, and see the world, and even today I see others doing that and feel as if life and the people I love pass me by. The only thing I really experienced was the crying. School did not give me a sense of fulfillment except that which comes knowing you survived a gauntlet with finesse. I went from a horrible kindergarten through 12th grade record to a perfect undergraduate record, and now I want to die knowing that I've left more people feeling loved than threatened in my future. I want to know that I too am loved when tabloid journalists responding to my activist efforts try to make others hate me. This is the first week of my life where I can treat the American education system as a separate part of my experience, and I've proved to myself that I can take control knowing that I can go the distance. I'm among a shrinking number of men who make it to a degree without getting jailed over a false accusation or collapsing into a psychotic break in his last attempts to hear someone finally say, "I understand how you feel." I really am one of the lucky ones, and I don't want to waste my second chance. I survive thanks to wonderful teachers, mentors, friends, and family, and I no longer need anyone's permission to succeed other than my own. I want to bring the patience, understanding, and love I've desperately needed for so many years to others. With this new beginning, I leave one observation to the upcoming graduating classes. There's a young man around you sitting alone. He may seem distant and awkward, and there's a chance that his emotional health depends on your warmth to remind him that he is worth something. He needs to know that you trust him to treat life as the adventure it is, until he develops the confidence to face the world in all of its horrors. You are part of what makes him choose to face it with a smile or to descend into a terrible void that comforts only the broken. Thank you very much for listening, and I send my thanks again to my family, my friends, and all of my loved ones for supporting me through hell and back in the American education system. Much love. This is Zen out.